First, the Australian community leading the charge to get vaccinated by a country mile. More than 90% of adults have had one jab and almost 3/4 are fully vaccinated. After doing the hard yards, they now want out of lockdown.
Politicians are beating their drums every day of the week.
Go and get yourself protected.
Some areas in the state are falling behind.
Trying to claim their place in a race that started embarrassingly slowly on the world stage.
I did not sign up, and no Victorian signed up to a national plan to vaccinate Sydney.
If we get the supply, we can get into people's arms.
For many of us, these battles have politicised the pandemic. And all the while, this little quaint seaside community has proved slow and steady wins the race.
Have you been vaccinated?
I have.
I'm double vaccinated.
Yes, fully
And proud.
Very proud.
Visiting Queenscliff, an hour-and-a-half's drive from Melbourne, it's harder to find someone unvaccinated than vaccinated.
The safest part of Australia right now in terms of COVID.
Correct.
For their hard work and dedication, they should be rewarded.
Queenscliff is now more protected from coronavirus than any other local government area in Australia. Nearly 72% of all locals over 15 are double jabbed and 91.8% have had their first dose.
Does that surprise you?
No, because I think our population here is very aware that as soon as we all get vaccinated, we can get back to some level of normality.
Andrew Nasida owns Queenscliff Brewhouse, distilling gin and whiskey for a community of around 3,000 people. And in non-COVID times, the thousands of tourists who flock into town.
Andrew, when was the last time you poured a beer out of these taps?
We've been closed for about 3 weeks in this current shutdown. Queenscliff has had no community transmission, so the reasons for being closed in this area of Victoria are very unclear.
And if you're not familiar with this little pocket of Victoria, you may also be wondering why it's leading the vaccine charge.
Because people are educated, care about each other and worry about the long-term problems that COVID could have.
I think because it's got an elderly population.
That will have contributed to it, but I think the health service down here has been very proactive in advertising and having spaces available to get people in.
And credit where credit's due, vaccination hubs aren't exactly on their front doorstep either, many driving 40 minutes to get the jab at Geelong's old Ford factory. And yet, their lives aren't any freer for it.
We're exactly the same as Melbourne, our restrictions at the moment, less the curfew. We have no curfew here at the moment.
So there's been no community transmission in Queenscliff. It's the highest vaccination rate in the country, and yet your business is still empty.
Yeah, it's sort of, the mind boggles a bit, doesn't it, really? What do you do?
For Dad Gareth Jones, who owns the local general store, 2021 has had drastic consequences.
Homeschool and things like that means that we sort of have some sort of restricted trade due to homeschool and that sort of thing. So that's been really, really tough trying to manage the business and get my kids educated as well.
We accept that's what it is, but it stings.
We do have online, but it's very hard to purchase a candle or a fragrance online when you can't actually get to smell it.
Sally and Chris Dennehy own 3 businesses in the Queenscliff LGA, feeling somewhat led down the garden path by government.
It was just the attitude of let's get vaccinated, and I think we're all still a little bit shell-shocked that we're locked down because we thought, the community thought by now we'd just be operating and living with COVID.
We believe we can go back to near normal living.
We don't have COVID in our region and we now have high vaccination rates, so it's time to open.
What sort of freedoms would you like Queenscliff to have, say, from tomorrow?
We would like to be reopened under normalised trading. We can have capacity restrictions, we can manage the 1 person per 4 square metres.
When you consider exactly where Queenscliff is, it seems locals may have a fair point. They're living on a point, the Bellarine Peninsula. And unlike, say, the Murray region, which is a busy thoroughfare for business and leisure, this place is quite the contrary, a sleepy coastal town. And unless you've got a boat, there is nowhere to go from here.
We can be as isolated from nearby populations as we want, because we are on the end of the road. So we could operate as only Queenscliff postcode 3225 without interacting with adjoining postcodes. It's just checking people's ID.
Catherine Bennett is Chair of Epidemiology at Deakin University.
If they're going to trial different leniency for people who are vaccinated, then it makes sense to do it in a place like Queenscliff.
But locals tell us intruders from other LGAs could present some problems.
We do have a lot of people sneak down here. When it's locked down, you know, you see people that don't live here.
So the problem is rule breakers.
Maybe that's the case, I don't know.
Interesting.
So if we're rewarded as such to say the Queenscliff Borough are vaccinated more than any other place in Australia, so we're going to allow you some privileges, and then maybe other areas will say, well, let's all get on board.
Queenscliff should be the location to do a test case of how we operate under reopening.
So you're happy to be a guinea pig?
We would love to be the guinea pig in Queenscliff and get reopened and show Australia and the rest of the world where we've got to.
Start pouring some beers,
Absolutely.
some gin, some whiskey.
Correct, that's what we're hoping. We're hoping it's not far away.
Can't blame them.